and you're good to go.
Awesome. Okay. Welcome, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order of the Regional Center Community Council. So we'll start this evening with a roll call and checking all the technology. So we'll start with Councillor Mason in District 7.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Councillor Cleary did join us. Great to be here and this first meeting of our short week.
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Mason. District 8, Councillor Smith.
Here and account for and ready to go.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Last but not least, District 9, the kind of the ringer who we weren't sure whether you'd make it, Councillor Cleary.
I love being the sort of the star attraction. This is awesome. Here, repping District 9, Halifax West Armdale. Ready to go, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. And we do have regrets tonight from Councillor Mancini. So that would be, who do we have for staff? I guess we'll start with our clerk.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
That would be Jill. Thank you. So do we have a solicitor? Sometimes I know we have one, sometimes we don't.
Yes, Mr. Chair, Meg McDougall here.
Thank you. And so then I think we have a plethora of planners as well to talk to us tonight.
Yeah. Good evening, Mr. Chair and councillors. Ben Seaback, Community Policy Program Manager. And I'll just note that Kasia is not going to be joining us this evening. She's told her to not sit in front of her computer in a hot day. She could do without it. I think Eric and I'm sure can handle it. Hopefully.
Thank you, Ben. I think I see Eric Luchik is here as well.
Thank you. So Eric Lusick, Director of Regional Planning. Glad to be here.
Thank you, Eric. Is this everybody, or is there anyone else who I haven't who hasn't spoken up yet? I think I'll take that as a yes, that we're good to go. We've identified all our key players. Everyone's technology is working. So next on our list, could I get someone to move approval of the minutes from our last meeting? Moved by Councillor Mason. Do I have a second out there?
Second, Councillor Cleary.
Councillor Cleary. All those in favor?
Hi.
Aye. So our minutes are approved. Approval of the order of business, additions and deletions. Ms. Clerk.
There's no additions or deletions.
Thank you. So could I get someone to move approval of the order of business?
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Moved by Councillor Cleary.
I'll second after I have a question, if I can ask Mr. Chair.
Yeah, sure. We haven't voted yet.
Right. So should we, and maybe we could just wait till we get down, but I was wondering if we should do committee the whole rules now, just so we get that piece over with, or do we want to just wait till we get to our reports?
Yeah, I was thinking that myself. I didn't have a chance to follow up on it. Ms. Clerk, when should we, if we want to do suspend the rules and do committee of the whole rules for this meeting, when would we do that? Would we do that for our specific item, or should we move that now?
Sorry about that. Yes, I would suggest that we do it now.
Okay.
Move the committee, or second the committee adopt committee of the whole rules since Linda.
Well, let's we've got the moved and I think second approval of the order of business. So let's do that, and then we'll promptly do a motion for committee of the whole. Okay.
Great.
Okay. So all those in favor of the approval of the order of business?
Aye.
Aye. So we've got the business order approved. Who would like to then move committee of the whole? Councillor Smith, I think you moved it.
Yeah, I'll move it because I know there's things that I haven't had a chance to talk to staff with, and we're going to be talking now.
Second.
Second by Councillor Mason. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we're going to do committee of the whole rules. So you can come back as many times as you want. All right. Moving right along. Business arising out of the minutes. We have none. Are there any conflicts of interest tonight? Seeing none. We have no motions of reconsideration, no motions of rescission, no deferred business. There are no tabled matters. We don't have, there's no public hearings tonight. Correspondence, petitions, and delegations. Does anyone have any petitions? Seeing none. Ms. Clerk, do we have any correspondence?
We did have correspondence which was circulated to the councillors, and it's all in regards to item 13.1.1.
Thank you, Ms. Clerk. So we'll move right along to our presentation. Do we have a fellow who might be familiar to the committee? Do we have Mr. Stephen Adams online?
You're still muted, Steve. I see him there.
Oh, I didn't even
There we
see
go.
him. We're still
Good?
on Jill.
Yeah, we can hear you
I
now.
can hear you. So, Mr. Adams, the floor is yours for a presentation.
Okay, how's this? There we go. Let me fix that computer. Okay, right on. Thank you. I'm assuming the committee of the whole rules don't apply to me. Right? Okay. I just did because you said you could go on and on. I'm not going to do that. First of all, look, thank you so much for entertaining our request to present. This is going to be about a 3-minute presentation. So first slide, the Urban Development Institute is just that's UDINS, and we represent anyone involved in the development industry, mostly in HRM, but across the province as well. Next slide, please. So there's 2 of us involved with UDI from the office perspective. I am the executive director, and Rob Norwood is our member services coordinator. He does all the cool Facebook stuff and social media and put this presentation together for us this evening. Next slide, please. Our mandate is to work with the government, and usually it's HRM, to ensure the policies that affect development are fair, consistent, and responsible fiscally, and that helps deliver affordable, quality, or high-quality housing for our residents. Next slide, please. You like how that little fancy thing there with the HRM flashed up? The Urban Development Institute, we're associated with a network of national organizations, right from Vancouver, Victoria, and Okanagan. We've contacted them, ULI in Toronto, and then in Halifax or Nova Scotia. And we're working with others as well to get some meetings set for. We want to have a national network. It's the largest and most recognized voice of land development in the province. And you can see the members here. There's just a few of them, but HRM is a member. You know, the developers and builders, of course, and really anybody involved in the development industry can be a member of UDI. Next slide, please. We have 17 members that are developers, 18 that are professionals. So that would include consultants, engineers, planners, architects, and 12 government or suppliers. So HRM, of course, Nova Scotia Power, Kent Building Supplies, and others. Next slide, please. So we look at some issues that affect the regional center, affordable housing, of course, the noise bylaw, which Councillor Clary has brought up, accessibility. We've been in contact with the province about accessible units, the permitting process that has just been implemented, and CMPs. And the CMPs I'd like to draw out just for a moment. The construction management plans, there have been reports of companies or whomever not following these rules. So I've worked with my colleagues with the Home Builders, Road Builders, and Construction Association, and we put a letter together I spoke with Peter Duncan about it to make sure it was what it would help HRM. So the letter basically told our members that you have a responsibility here. You have signed on to a CMP. You better well follow it. And and I'll put this out to the members, if there are areas where the CMP is not being followed, if they're a member of our organization or others, please let me know, and we will do our best to make sure they come into compliance. And the way it was explained to us, if there's some of the HRM staff have to go out and start enforcing the CMPs, then they're not available to review permits and help move those along. And the center plan review is more of an area specific, which would be of great interest to this to our group of course, and this community council. Next slide, please. So from a perspective of industry, we can help with some some assistance with HRM and with members of council. We see things from a different perspective, but I still say, we're all on the same side here. We can offer solutions. We're in communications on a weekly basis with the Construction Association, road builders and home builders, with HRM staff led by Connor O'Day. And we have an opportunity to bring concerns forward and bounce ideas off each other. And we can also address any concerns that community council, for whatever community council has, and HRM council as a whole may have as they arise. Next slide, please. Finally, we do appreciate the work you do. We know firsthand how much effort you put into this and what entails the life of a counselor. And I can assure you that you may not hear it enough from us, but I can assure you your efforts do not go unnoticed. This slide, that's the end of my presentation. I believe this has been distributed to you. And if you have any questions, or our contact information down there, or you may have questions from this presentation, but I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adams, for the presentation. Councillor Smith, do you have a question?
That was during agenda setting. Or, yeah, that was earlier.
Yeah. Committee of the whole.
But I'll say thank you, Steve. Well, I can.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Adams, for coming in and presenting to us today. I'm not seeing any questions at this time, but I know most of us have had the opportunity, at least we did at Harbor East. We had the opportunity to hear from you there. So thank you very much for coming in today and showing the old face around these parts.
Oh, you call me old. And, Councillor Mancini, this is both meetings he's missed. I think it's me. I won't do any more with you fellas. That way you can show up. But,
Adams, if the shoe fits.
Well, there are certain times when you don't even have to state the obvious, but every now and again. Anyway, thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Steve. It's nice seeing you.
Yeah, you have a good night. Thank you.
Okay, so moving along from our presentation, I've lost my agenda here. Next thing would be information items brought forward. We have none. So now we're moving on to our main event, the staff report 13.1.1, the draft regional center secondary municipal planning strategy. Did worse in my agenda here. It says a presentation could be provided if needed. I think all of us has seen this several times over now. Or would committee like to have a presentation, or can we proceed? I'm seeing lots of enthusiasm for getting down to work, since we've all been through the presentation now 2, 3, 4 times. Thank you for that. So would someone like to put the motion on the floor to open up discussion? I see Councillor Mason.
I move that Halifax Center Community Council recommend that Halifax Regional Council, 1, give first reading and schedule a public hearing to consider Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy and the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw as set in attachment A and B of this report. 2, adopt the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy and Regional Center Land Use Bylaw as set in attachments A and B of this report, including repealing the Regional Center Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy Package A and the Regional Center Land Use Bylaw Package A, the Secondary Municipal Planning Strategy for Downtown Dartmouth and the Land Use Bylaw for Downtown Dartmouth and the Land Use Bylaw for Halifax Peninsula. I so move.
Second by Councillor Smith. Councillor Mason.
Well, I mean, I've kind of said it all before at the 4 or 5 other opportunities I've had, comment on this. I have some amendments I'd like to make. I will say that I was kind of disturbed a little bit by a story in the media that council was slashing a developer's rights when the developer bought a property that was zone 14 meters and the title should have been council meets them halfway, right? Because not giving somebody what they ask for that's over and above what we've been discussing the last 6 years is not a slash, but I digress. So I would like to put some amendments on the floor. I distributed them to staff and or to clerks and staff, I guess, and I don't know if I included Ben actually, but they've seen them all before. So I move that Regional Center Community Council recommend that Halifax Regional Council consider amending the proposed land use bylaw and secondary municipal planning strategy as applicable. 1, to create a policy in 4.2 cultural resources of the proposed MPS that will allow council may consider adopting a policy to enable development of heritage development agreement policy to apply to built form provisions in the DH1 downtown zone while respecting the rampart and view plane height restrictions. 2, create a policy in section 9.5 of the discretionary approvals of the MPS, either in IM7 or as its own policy, where council may, by policy or resolution, endorse a process for shortened rapid public engagement and review process for NEDA that is entirely or substantially meeting an affordable housing need as recognized by CMHC or Housing Nova Scotia, and subject to completion of the affordable housing enforcement legislation and regulations by the province of Nova Scotia as required. And then 3, create a policy that will allow council may consider, left that out of there, adopting a policy to allow implementation of renewable energy technologies in buildings that are designed to meet or exceed net zero energy ready standards by incentivizing the use of the post-bonus density values as found in Center Plan Section 12 of the Land Use Bylaw. I so move that amendment. I'll unpack them for everybody.
Second, Councillor Cleary.
Second by Councillor Cleary. Councillor Mason on your omnibus amendment.
So none of these force staff to do a whole lot of work right now to create policy in the land use bylaw or otherwise, because these are creating potentially MPS and LUB amendments that would allow council to consider in the future some things. And so the first one is, we're under a lot of pressure right now we have been unsuccessful at registering any of the potential heritage sites in downtown Halifax that were identified in the plan in 2009. And the 2009 plan allows the developers to build substantially larger buildings than most of the heritage that's on those sites. So we basically incentivized tearing down much of that heritage. And I don't blame anybody. The vibe of the time, and I went to those meetings, was, if we passed the downtown plan, maybe we'll get 1 or 2 buildings built. And here we are 42 buildings later in the DH1 zone, or I think it's up to 50 now. And yay us, but it means that these buildings are under tremendous pressure. So what some of the developer representatives, some of the planners have said is that we could develop a policy. We're not going to get it done in time for Center Plan, but we want to have it open in the MPS to allow us to move setbacks and step backs so that we can save a substantial part of the building and move the volume around the site, but keep it underneath the ramparts. Won't work on every site. Be very hard to do general policy because it's going to be very site specific, and we all recognize that, but I want to keep the door open because I think it's our best chance at saving some of the heritage outside of the HCDs. Second one is about, if we're going to do some kind of affordable housing proposal on a large scale in one of the new growth nodes, are we able to accelerate that? The key piece there is it has to actually be recognized as affordable housing by CMHC and Housing Nova Scotia, and it has to be enforceable, right? If we're going to do something on the scale of a bunch of units in a future growth node, it has to be that once we've approved it, that the developer can't just turn around and flip the property and then sell them at market value. It has to be enforceable. These rights and this thing only happens if it's affordable. So there's a lot of spade work to do there, and the province so far has not completed those regulations. For example, the enforceability could have come through density bonusing. That hasn't happened in 5 years. And then the third one is something which staff are very ambivalent about, and I expect that to come back in the staff report, and I get that. But the intention is not to say, oh, we're going to let you use, instead of having public art, this wouldn't touch your affordable housing. You have to do affordable housing, but for the 1/3 or whatever that's not going into affordable housing, the idea is, and this was a request of UDI, you may recall a number of months ago, we got a letter from them, and Alex Loff and Peter Pauly had signed the letter. And the idea is you have to already be net zero energy ready. We're not giving you money anymore. We're not giving you bonuses anymore to be LEED's Gold. Everybody's doing that anyway. If you're building a building and you're going to hold the building, you're building a green building because it's lower cost in the long run. But if you want to get into geothermal, or you want to get into wind, or you want to get into solar, or you want to get into any of that stuff, on those scales, the return on investment is longer than reasonable for a bank to fund it, right? Like we want them to do those things. They need help doing it. And our investment would be nothing compared to what they'd have to get from the feds and the province to make it work. But I think it's an important thing to have that door open. So that also sets us up to develop a policy to do that. We don't know exactly how we do that yet because it's still so brand new, and it would probably have to align with emerging federal and provincial policies on that. But again, it's not about giving people money to, triple glaze and insulate adequately. You have to have done all the net zero things before you'd even qualify. You'd have to have an independent inspector or engineer say you had done so. So those are my 3 amendments. They're all kind of more MPS than LUB this time. I don't have anything else so I won't need to come back unless there's any questions or debate or separating. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I don't see any questions at this time. So perhaps we can, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. So really quickly for 2, the rapid public engagement, is that different from what would that be similar to what's required in our past drafts? Because I know this draft, we've eliminated some of that public engagement. So would there be any difference in the public engagement, or is it relatively the same?
Well, so this is specifically talking about future growth nodes. So the issue with future growth node is that you have to do the community engagement to create a vision, and that can be up to 2 years, right? And so, we have an opportunity on one site, possibly more future growth nodes, and we may have something similar when the suburban plan comes to do some substantial affordable housing. And so the question is, can we shorten that so we can get the affordable housing on the market faster? We have interest from a developer. We have interest from government, other levels of government, other orders. We'll see if it pans out. But that's why it's written in that way. It would create an opportunity in the MPS to develop a policy, but we probably wouldn't develop the policy until we saw it moving forward, right? And we wouldn't develop the policy until the province had the enforceability.
Makes sense. I'm good. Thank you.
You're good, Councillor Smith? Okay. Seeing nothing else, I think we can safely call for the question on that. So all those in favor? All those opposed? So that carries. Okay.
Thank you, colleagues.
So that would be Councillor Mason. Would anyone else? Councillor Cleary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. I just put a motion in the chat, and I'll read it here, that Halifax Regional Council that Regional Center Community Council recommend Halifax Regional Council direct the CAO to consider amending the proposed land use bylaw to 1, create 2 separate cluster housing zones, a CH1 that would prohibit mobile homes and a CH2 that would allow mobile homes, and zone the cluster housing properties in the regional center appropriately. And 2, ensure any access or driveways on a cluster housing zoned properties are from a public road directly to the property.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Second by Councillor Mason.
So just very quickly on this one, and this is something we kind of discussed offline, looking at cluster housing. This is a very new thing for Halifax. We've never had this, especially in the urban core. And the cluster housing zone, I think, is appropriate on certain kinds of sites, and I'm happy to see it zoned in a few different places. My concern is with the permissiveness of what's allowed on a cluster housing zone property, and particularly in the urban core, some mobile homes, where if you look at the definition of a mobile home, it's basically just any wheeled conveyance that you can live in that just kind of drives up whether or not it has wheels on it after it's installed. And for me, if you know, I've got a cluster housing zoned property down Prince Arthur, just south of Quinpool, in an R1 zoned area, and it's a unique kind of lot set back half an acre. It's got access to Quinpool. It's got access to Prince Arthur. It's the kind of thing we should probably zone differently than some of our others. But my concern would be with the neighborhood generally, if it all of a sudden has 5 mobile homes that pop up on it, that might look quite strange in the middle of the urban core, just down from a pedestrian oriented Main Street. So what I'd like staff to do is look at this one. And the reason number 2 is there to ensure that they have driveway access directly from a public road. The particular property I'm referring to actually has an easement that comes through a neighboring property, and that's currently where their driveway is. And I don't think it would be fair for the property to be developed with a number of cluster homes on it and then continue to traverse over that neighbor's property with multiple units. And so if they were going to do a cluster home development there, it would have to have their own public road access. So that's why I have number 1 and number 2. So thank you, colleagues.
Okay. Not seeing anyone buzzing in, I will speak briefly from the chair on this. Councilor Cleary, you took one off my list. I had the same motion pretty much ready to go on it. Yours is much prettier, so well done. And I very much support this. I have 1 or 2 cluster zones in my district as well. And actually, I have a mobile home park that works quite well. And so it wouldn't make, I like having a cluster 1 and a cluster 2 because I wouldn't want to downzone that and to make it into something that's non-conforming. They should have zoning that fits and allow and is permissive for that park. But at the same time, on Rose Street here in downtown Dartmouth, we have a cluster zone where a bunch of tiny homes would work, I think, quite well. But a mini mobile home park is probably not what people are envisioning in the neighborhood. So I think this is a good thing. So with that, I guess we'll call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? So that carries. Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Are there any other motions there from members of council tonight? Or discussion or questions? Councillor Smith.
So mine are semi-prepared, and we'll probably turn into discussions because this last week got away from me, and this week snuck up even faster. So most cases, I like to have my stuff prepared and work with staff. Some of these I've talked to staff about and colleagues here, but I haven't formally shared it as motions. So the first one that I want to have a quick discussion on is yeah, I'll have discussion with colleagues, is thinking of the Heritage Development Agreement that's part of the Center Plan Package B. One of the concerns that I have, and this might be separate from this discussion here, so that's why I need to formulate it. One of the issues that we're seeing, and I won't use any particular projects, but we know that developers are using Heritage DAs to, one, save heritage, but to also gain further development. One of the issues that we have with that is there's no way for us to truly understand the economic side of what they need to make it economically feasible and what we're being told they need to put into the property. So for example, if a developer is saying, in order to save this heritage building, we need to put $2 million worth of restoration into that building, that's why we need X story building. It's up to the Heritage Committee and staff to do a proposal, but there's no way for us to look at the development piece of it and say, well, actually, you don't need your 17 stories, you only need 4. So what I'm wondering, and this might not be a package B discussion, and that's maybe help you colleagues, you can help with this, should there be a criteria and study around a performa tool regarding heritage development agreements, because we're using those development agreements to save heritage, which has a financial aspect to it. So I have a motion, but it might not be a motion for today.
Yeah, maybe the best thing to do at this point, Councillor Smith, would be to go to Eric or Ben to get some staff feedback.
Right. And we had a great discussion on this, and Ben, maybe you can help formulate, because my fear was putting this forward or having this discussion and not doing it when we should. But Ben, if you have any advice, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor, for the opportunity to weigh in on this one. It's I think you're zeroing in on quite a key policy in the Heritage DA that I know our Heritage team has proposed some wording tweaks to try to make it stronger, because you want to make the uplift proportional to what they're investing in. But as you say, how do you calculate that? How do you measure that? But I did mention to Councillor Smith the other day is that at this time, I guess the thinking about the policy being fairly high level is that the details, the analysis of the right proportional would be captured in the staff report. That the Heritage team does have a bit of a formula that they intend to use for different proposals, but they didn't want to put it right in the MPS policy because they wanted to be able to adjust it as needed and based on experience. So that's the current thinking. But having said that, it's possible it could be stronger too. So I'd suggest to this committee, if it is something you want, myself and the Heritage team and staff to take a harder look at that policy in terms of how it can make it stronger, perhaps we can bring in some of that formula into the policy. It was something that we had been discussing. Then a motion would be appropriate, and in the next staff report we could provide some more information on it. And Eric, you're more also involved with this one as well. So if you have further thoughts on this, and please don't hesitate to weigh in.
Thank you, Ben. Eric, did you have anything you would want to add?
Sorry, my video's coming. No, I think Ben captured it well. Any direction that council wants to offer, we'll happily report back on, though.
Thank you, Eric. So the Councillor Smith, this would put the ball firmly back in your court as to how you might want to proceed.
So if there's no comments from colleagues, I don't mind taking this back and having further discussions with staff and maybe bringing it to council when it comes in August. I can do it now, but again, as I mentioned, I haven't had a chance to really dig down with it with staff. So if I can do it now and I have a motion, but I also don't mind waiting until it comes to council.
Why don't we just quickly ask staff how they would like their medicine? Would they prefer to have something that's not maybe fully formed now, so they have a sense as to what to look for, or would they rather have it a little more polished up for a future? I guess the only opportunity here out would be CPED before council.
Right, CPED, yeah.
So perhaps we'll go to staff and just make sure that we are setting this up to work as well as we can with them.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair, and back to Councillor Smith and the councillors. That's pretty rare. We're asked when we want things to come, but so I'll take it the opportunity. But a motion today is fine. But Councillor Smith, I'd suggest if the opportunity is also in CPED, I would suggest we have a meeting with that. I'd be more comfortable having the Heritage team involved, Aaron Murnahan and Kurt Pyle, because they have certainly more thought about this more than I have, and to have them part of the discussion and to assist you with how you might word your motion, I think would be more advisable than to trying to patch together a motion now. If you can wait a couple of weeks to CPED to iron out the details in a bit more.
Well, Mr. Chair, I don't mind waiting to CPED, and thank you for that, Ben. And I'll speak one more time on one other thing, and then I'll leave the floor to anyone else who might have some comments. So the other question, and this is really a discussion for colleagues here, and I've had a discussion with Ben and Eric and team around the level 3 site plan approval process. That will, we're getting rid of the site plan approval process in general. And I had a concern when it came to level 3 site plan, which I can't think of the exact square footage of type of building that would fall under that off top. But usually level 3 site plans are bigger buildings or bigger developments, like St. Pat's Alexander, Bloomfield, St. Pat's High, I should say, Bloomfield, and others of that size, where there'd be, I guess, a need from the policy to do public engagement. The issue that we've seen is some of these public engagements that have been mandated in the past are not great, and are not as good as our usual robust HRM ran public engagement sessions. So I understand why staff removed this, because we saw it and realized that we're only getting basic feedback from residents. But I think there's also a piece of, when we're talking about larger developments, how do we want to give the broader community and residents impact an opportunity to at least give some, if it's not input, just share the views that they might have on it. And maybe it's not needed. So really, I just wanted to have a discussion with colleagues today saying, do we think we need to put level 3 site plans back in for those larger developments, or the policies that we have in place today should deal with those concerns, and there's other avenues residents can use to give comments.
I think Councillor Cleary, were you sticking up your hand?
I was. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And to my colleague, it's one of those things where with the site plan approval process, because there was things to decide for the development officer, there was a chance to appeal stuff. And our experience over the last year has been that what's been appealed is not actually appealable. So when you talk about articulation and the number of windows and the distance between, this side of the building and that side of the building, none of the appeals were about those things. It was all about parking, and I don't want the building in my neighborhood. And that part's like, once we said, okay, here's what you can do in the land use bylaw, that ship sailed. So I guess my question to staff would be, is there a way to write into the land use bylaw a process by which a developer on large scale buildings has to provide information to the community? Because with the level 1, 2, and 3, it was kind of okay, you need a sign, you need a website and a sign, you need a website, a sign, and a public meeting. And so is there a way to provide information to the community, whether it's a sign, whether it's a postcard, that they have to deliver saying, this is what's coming. If you have feedback, please send it to us. And of course, it's still in the developer's camp where this feedback comes in, because if it's in the land use bylaw and says you can do it, we're not going to tell them they can't do it. But to staff, is there a way to write that in so it's not through a site plan approval, but there's a mechanism by which a developer has to collect public opinion or public feedback on elements of their building?
We'll go to staff for that very easy question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'm back to Councillor, and I hope you're, being sarcastic about that because it is unfortunately a little bit of it tricky, and I don't have a definitive answer, but maybe it's something we can go back and talk to our legal staff. Is that part of the challenge is under the charter, the only time it says we required a developer to do consultation before they submitted permit application is through the site plan approval process. And of course, through development agreements and rezonings, we can do it at any consultation we want. When it comes to just a development permit, we can require all sorts of forms and drawings and so on, but it doesn't list consultation. And that's where I think we get into, well, it says that you can do it here. It doesn't say you can do it here. So therefore you probably can't under the standard development agreement, but I can't say we specifically asked legal staff for their opinion about that. So it is something maybe we can follow up on. Having explained that though, the other areas that we can do it is after a permit is issued, and maybe it's maybe too late in terms of what you're thinking here, but after a permit is issued, we can certainly require things to be done. And that's exactly what we're doing with the CMP, the construction management plan. So the proposal, it's allowed under the policies and the zones, and they've received their permits, but now we require them to consult with the surrounding neighborhood about the impacts of construction, where that could impact things like hours and maybe not hours, but hoarding, and just the way they manage the construction on that site. So there's some teeth to that consultation because it has a clear purpose. but it happens after the permit's been issued, not before. And I think what Councillor Cleary gets at is something that it's doesn't seem to be an opening in the Halifax Charter, or unless we kind of interpret it a little bit more creatively. And if there's a will to look at this harder, I think I would need to circle back to our legal staff to advise if there is any wiggle room there. I don't know, hopefully that answers the question a bit.
Thanks, Ben. And I appreciate what Councillor Smith's trying to do, and I agree with it. I just don't want to set up false hope for residents that say, well, you know, if we can have our voice on this, then we can stop this project. I mean, that's the whole point of the center plan, is we're rezoning everything in the urban core to say, here's what you can build here. And you know, it's not the same process where our old bylaws from the 70s and 80s were such that, you know, every application that was coming in was to change the MPS or to change the land use bylaw. Now the bylaw is updated and it says, here's what you can do. And so I see your point. And in fact, if you wanted to ask for some sort of report, a supplemental report, or ask for a staff report on how we could do that, I would certainly support that. Because I think there should be a way for the public to give their input to the developer. Obviously, it's voluntary on what the developer does with it once we zone something, but it would be nice to see that process unfold. So I'm not sure if you have a motion ready, but I would certainly support it if you did.
I think, well, with that, we'll go to Councillor Mason, who indicated he would like to speak on this too.
So it's interesting, you know, I certainly talked to Councillor Smith about this in the last couple of weeks leading up to this, and my feeling is that you know, part of this is we've learned where the pain points are by having passed package A and having seen in real life kind of what some of the decisions or outcomes can be. So for me, and I'm going to use Dartmouth as an example, like the Pressler building there, 17 stories right at Nantucket and Wise. I don't think we need to have big public engagement about that. They're going to fill in the boxes, they're going to do it. Right across the road, I read in All Nova Scotia, they're now proposing 3 30-story towers on that giant lot that has the former Holiday Inn on it. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a commonality here, right? The pain points are the lack of consultation around St. Pat's High site and this very large site there, and potentially some of the stuff on Roby Almond could be problematic. And I think we got good results from having strong public engagement on, for example, the Richmond Yard site. But I think it's also too late, right? I mean, we passed package A, and so for me, it's not as simple as do we want to bring back level 3 site plan approval or not? Because I don't want to bring that back for small, large buildings, if that makes sense. You know, like the ones that we're talking about on Roby, like the latest one that Bank is building, for example. I wouldn't want to have. The whole point of this is that it's the right size site. They fill in the numbers that we've given them, and they go and they build it. So I really think it's about the larger sites that aren't the 1 hectare where they can do a DA, that aren't a future growth node, where we have kind of a gap where potentially having more public engagement would make for better outcomes. But that's a huge departure from what we've been aiming for since we started the center plan process in 2014. So I'm not sure that it's possible at this late date to retrofit that in there, but that's my observation. Like, I really don't want to be having discussions about like 15 and 17 story buildings that are meeting all of our design guidelines and doing exactly what we want. I understand the concern when you're talking about building 600 or 700,000 square feet at St. Pat's High, or 3 30-story towers on Wise Road. The public wants to know how that's going to interface at the back of that lot with the ER1 homes on Windmill Road. And I see Councillor Austin nodding, and we don't have a way for them to be involved in that conversation. So I'm wondering, is there any way, and I don't know if staff have any thoughts or if we should take this away and come back later, but I don't want to slow down the pretty straightforward stuff for these kind of extraordinarily large sites that are, I think, causing the public and causing us concern.
I think there was a bit of a question there at the very end. So we'll go to staff to see if someone will volunteer for that one.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I thought I heard a question there, and that's why I turned on my video, because it is something we've thought about. And to be honest, when we were first looking at the site plan approval and proposing change, we thought about we're still requiring it for larger proposal, but then struggled with, well, what is it we're going to consult about? What is going to be appealable through that process? So it's kind of more. I'm kind of framing my response a little bit more of a question. I think Councillor Mason's identifying some large proposals. I can see why that some sort of consultation would be needed, and I guess that the zero a little bit more into that. And my question for discussion would be, what is it about the project that merits some consultation, where a community can weigh in, that is worth having that decision appealable to community council? Because if you can identify what the item you want to consult about, then that can be pushed into that site plan variation option, that under a certain to build over a certain size or a certain height or whatever it is that you want to consult about, you have to go through the site plan variation process and then identify those criteria that you want to consult the neighborhood about, and that potentially could be appealed to community council. And if it becomes easier to work it in, to amend the plan, to work that in and still use the site plan tool, if we're very clear about what is it we want to consult about, what is it we want some discretionary decision over, and then that tool can be used. So just to add that perspective into the conversation. That wasn't really an answer, as more of a here's a potential approach that can maybe work for the type of thing that Councillor Mason's thinking about.
Thank you, Ben. Councillor Mason, did you want to follow up on that at all?
Well, I think it goes back to Councillor Smith now, and maybe it's something we can do now. Maybe we need to talk to staff some more and bring a motion. You guys can bring a motion and see if better we bring it to the floor of council. But I think we just need a very light hand here, because we don't want to slow down normal large buildings, which is something Halifax didn't have until we passed package A. We want to keep that. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I'll speak just briefly on this myself. I see a corollary here with design, with the role of the design committee, which I would be more in favor of if there was a way to have projects go through design review, retain even if they without site plan approval, if we could somehow retain that. I am somewhat leery of a world where it is someone pops into City Hall with an application, it goes through a checklist through a development officer, and then is stamped in a way it's go, without any sort of, whether it's public, whether it's design professionals, without any sort of external input into that outside of the applicant and the planning department box. It's not necessarily that someone's going to take the advice that's offered, be it from neighbors or be it from other design professionals. But in the absence of that advice, there certainly won't be any suggestions that are taken up on that, might be optional, but could also still make a better project. So I have lingering unease in this area too, regarding both design review and public input, right? If we're cutting out too much of it by by ditching the site plan approval process. So for a lot of this anyway. So that is, I share some of the unease. I don't think we had, Councillor Smith.
So thanks, Chair. What I'll do for this one as well is, because I think there's some good points, and my motion was mostly related to level 3 site plan. And I think we should broaden it, but also laser focus it in. So the level 3 would have included some of those buildings that we really don't want to have engagement on, but we do want to talk about those bigger pieces. So I'll work on something that talks more about really large projects and how that should look. And I'm not exactly sure, so I'm not going to try to make it up as we go. So I'll have that ready for CPED and go back with staff. But the motion I have is really, I think, not focusing on the biggest issue that we have here. So I'm not going to put a motion forward on that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. We'll look for that at CPED, and I will do some of my own homework about design review as well. I'm also not ready for something tonight on that. Do you have anything else you'd like to bring forward, Councillor Smith?
unless somebody else wants to speak, and I can keep going. I have an actual written motion this time that I can paste in the chat. So I'll keep going if you want.
Yeah, why don't you do that? I have a few from my district, but being the chair, I was going to wait to the very end. So why don't you go ahead?
All right. So again, these are ones I haven't really had an opportunity to talk to staff with. So I'll read it. Regional Center Community Council recommend the Halifax Regional Council consider amending the proposed land use bylaws and secondary municipal planning strategy to include a provision that allows for consideration for additional units through internal conversion in AR3 zones, and 2, to review landmark building policy, landmark building policy to exclude code compliance additions from the currently allowed 10% addition.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
Second, Councillor
Second
Cleary.
by Councillor Cleary. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, and there's many spelling mistakes because again, this is one that I kind of been working on trying to catch up with. So number one is one of the issues that we're seeing around this package now is because we have really prescribed zones, and we're coming from a place where we had many different zones and ways that we could zone a property from R2A to R2 to R2, whatever else you want to add inside there, which allows for different variations of properties or different variations of unit mixes. Where now we really only have a few ER1, 2, or ER2, 3, HR, corridor, et cetera. So what I'm running into from speaking to some landowners is, or property owners, is that they want to do internal conversions within their properties, and the only way that they could meet the allowed unit counts would be for them to be zoned HR. But some of these existing non-compliant, which would now be non-compliant apartment buildings, are in areas that we wouldn't want to see HR developments in because of many different factors. So what I think could work is if there are properties zoned ER3, and staff could write some planning language around certain I don't want to say square footage, but certain policies would allow land or property owners to do internal conversions, because what we do, we want to encourage density, but we also want to make sure that we're working within the context of the neighborhood. So this, I'm happy if folks have some suggestions for that. And for example, I have one property in the neighborhood that wants to do internal conversion. They have 21 to 2,300 square foot units that they want to split up, which is that's a large, in today's market, that's a large apartment. And they want to be able to split those up and add units. But in order to do that, with our current rules, they have to go to HR1. But because it's adjacent to an ER1, or in an ER1 area, HR wouldn't really work, because if they sell it, we now have something that probably the neighbors wouldn't be too happy about. So really trying to look for a balance. Maybe there's no balance. Maybe it's really HR, but I'm just wondering if there's any comments, and this would allow staff to kind of go back and have those further discussions around that. So happy for any comments or suggestions, or if you don't support it.
Well, thank you, Councillor Smith. Does anyone else on the committee would like to lean in? I think Councillor Cleary would.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll certainly support this, because I think both number one and number two, but particularly number one that Councillor Smith just really spoke to, there are unique situations where you have maybe existing already 3, 4, 5, 6 unit large homes that have those unit counts, and the established residential zonings don't allow for anything over the 3 unit plus a secondary suite. And so whether it's an internal conversion clause that is regional center wide for ER3s, or whether it's a development agreement option for ER3 zone properties. I think, whatever staff can come back with in a report would be good, because they're, 90% of the homes that we have now proposed zoned ER1, ER2, ER3 are very appropriately zoned. But there's that kind of 5-10% that are kind of, well, that's weird, or, gosh, it's non-compliant now, or non-conforming, so they have no option. Because if you remember, we talked a couple of years ago about having a development agreement option for residential properties, but that was stripped out in the latest draft. So right now you can only do a DA for non-conforming, non-residential properties. And so if it's a residential property, that opportunity doesn't exist. Is there a way to put it back in? What parameters do you put on it to control it, to ensure that, we're not just up zoning a bunch of people? And I think staff will have some ideas to come back with. So I would look forward to that and support this, because I do think there might be, and I do know of a few in my own district, and I know of one in Councillor Smith's district that I talked to someone who has some property here as well, where, it really doesn't fit, and it might be better for them to have 6 units or 8 units, but they can't, they're not allowed. And so I think this is worthwhile for staff to go dig in a bit more and see if there are, for these unique situations, a path forward that adds that gentle or invisible density. Because if it's an internal conversion, the built form is already there. We're just adding more people to it. And so I think that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. So I'll definitely support this, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Seeing no one else, I think we can call the question on that one, unless you want to chime back in, Councillor Smith.
Unless you want me to explain number 2, but if number 2 is fine, then I'll just go to the question.
If you wouldn't mind, I would be interested in hearing what number 2 is about. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. So number 2. So with the new landmark designation that we have, we've made some staff. When I say we, I'm speaking to staff. Made some changes to allow for many different aspects of what can happen in landmark building, because before it was very prescribed in what we wanted to do in landmark type buildings, but staff were able to make some changes that makes it a little bit more lenient for somebody who wants to do improvements, add units, et cetera, et cetera. One of the last pieces related to the 10% would be for a landmark building, a property owner can add 10% to the building itself, addition, and that can be habitable space, so units, it could be whatever internally. But one of the issues that I've seen, I have one property in particular, that the 10% that they want to add, so they want to add an addition with units, but they also need to add code compliant stairs. So one of them is a necessity. The other stairwell, so two stairwells. One's a necessity. The other one's more of a good to have. But those 2 stairwells, which would allow that building to come up to code, are actually included in that 10%. So what they have asked for is, thanks for relaxing the 10% addition and et cetera. But now we're running into this place where we want to add accessible code compliant stairwells. That's not habitable space, but that goes towards our 10%. So can we write in policy that doesn't include code compliance? And to me, that I think that's actually a great thing to do, because we want to encourage some of these older landmark buildings to come up to code. And if the property owner is saying they have no issue doing it and they'll do the investment, we should try to encourage that. And again, there might be some policies needed just to make sure they're not adding things outside of what's code compliant and what I want. But for my case, for a property that's up on Normandy Drive, these 2 stairwells are code compliant, and they're being told they have to build them. One for sure, the other one, it depends when they come in with an application, what the development officer would say. But yeah, that's really it for that one.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. Seeing no further questions or anything, I think we can call the question on this one as well. So all those in favor?
Right?
Aye. All those opposed? All right, so that carries. Is there anything else from council? Well, seeing none, I would like to relinquish the chair here to Councillor Mason so that I can put forward a motion of my own.
Did we vote on Councillor Smith's motion?
We just did, Councillor Mason.
Did I nod? Oh, look at that beautiful dog.
You didn't
I'll-
register no, so I counted it as a yes.
With my door closed to my office and no access to the air conditioning in the rest of the house, I find my brain is rapidly shutting down. But I'll do the best I can to chair this part of the meeting. Chair recognizes Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I, like Councillor Smith, am not quite as organized tonight as I normally would be. So apologies to committee that I didn't send this out ahead of time. I'm going to paste it into the chat. There we go. Yeah, I didn't paste it all. It's not the most pretty thing, but it's all there. So I move that Regional Center Community Council recommend Halifax Regional Council consider amending the proposed land use bylaw and secondary municipal planning strategy to 1, remove references to wider setbacks on Canal Street and the St. James Church view plane from the Dartmouth Cove future growth node. 2, include PIDs 406-12376, PID 4061-2996, and PID 406-12384 in the Dartmouth Cove Future Growth Node, and increase FAR values for all properties in the Dartmouth Cove Future Growth Node on the harbor side of the tracks to potentially support mixed-use development, including residential. 3, increase the height of PID 414-96415 from 20 meters to 23 meters. 4, increase the height of 5 Newcastle to 14 meters. 5, include 151 Joffrey Street as a landmark building. 6, remove Lions Beach from the Boat Club special area and add PID 00636290 and PID 000943334 to the Boat Club special area. 7, apply downtown zoning to the portion of PID 407-39831 that is south of the southern lot line of number 20.5 Pleasant Street. Yeah, we'll just leave that one at that. There's a bit of a clip there, but it's not needed. So that would be my motion.
Moved by Councillor Austin. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Cleary. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll go through this quickly. I'll try to anyway. So number 1, removing the references to the wider setbacks on Canal Street and the view plane of St. James is just basically it's a mea culpa for HRM. When we were doing Dartmouth Cove in the first go around, the initial thought the future growth node would extend up to Portland Street, but then as we were refining things, we determined, well, we should leave the properties that front on Portland Street out of the Dartmouth Cove future growth node because those properties can proceed as development already. And we've had them off its pharmacy redevelopment now, taking us up on that offer. They've had one portion of their project approved, and there's another piece of it that's in the approval phase ready to go. The challenge that we've run into is we required a large setback on Canal Street to preserve sort of a view of St. James Church, which is not quite a terminating vista. It's a little off center. And we required that in the Dartmouth Cove future growth node, but we all missed actually putting a setback on the block of Canal Street up at the intersection of Portland. That setback should have been larger to match what we were going to require in Dartmouth Cove, and we just all missed it. And as a result, we set the street up so that it's coming along like this, and then it's going to jut down like this, and then go like that. So we're not preserving a view of St. James Church. We're preserving a view of the back of the tower that is going to go up at the end of the street. So I think we should throw in the towel on that one because we've it's been messed up, and at this point, development has been approved that's been based on the setbacks being what we actually approved, not what we meant them to be. So that's my own correction for that. Number two is down on the other side of the tracks. We've got a little bit of crisis of identity in Dartmouth Cove. The properties on the south side of the tracks, there's language at the front of the Dartmouth Cove future growth node that talks about residential being an option for that property, which is almost entirely vacant, mostly infill. But then in the actual guts of the precinct for that, it very much doesn't talk about residential, and we've assigned a FAR value for that property of only 1.0, which is less than a registered heritage property. It is about the most clear, we do not want anything to happen with this land that you could actually put on it. And I don't think that that's entirely fair or necessarily thought through. We've got a lot going on in Dartmouth Cove. There's a lot of challenges with developing those lands because of the railroad tracks, because of the whole access along the waterfront. I had some philosophical questions about, well, preserving harbor industrial. And if we are preserving harbor industrial, do we really want to preserve it in Dartmouth Cove right next to Kings Wharf and all the other high density residential? So I think it would be worthwhile for staff to go back and take a really close look at that to make sure that we are in fact doing what we should be doing with that. I kind of feel that we should be allowing more mixed use there. There's opportunities to extend the boardwalk to potentially get the access along the Dartmouth waterfront. Number three is simply increasing the height on a property next to Lancaster and the highway. It's next to the First Baptist Church lands. It doesn't border on any low density residential directly. It's buffered from all of it. The developer has done a plan. He needs about 1 more meter to make it work. So I don't think that is a big ask of us. Increase the height at 5 Newcastle. This is one that it's a higher order residential. It's not one that supports a great deal of density because it's next to a registered heritage property. It's at the transition point in, but I think we can do 14 rather than 11 on that site. Joffrey Street, it's a church. It's currently a church. I am not aware of any plan to move it. We missed it. It's kind of an out of the way one. And in the first draft, it was missed as an institutional zone. Staff corrected that based on the notes that I provided them before they finalized the latest draft for us. But in doing so, it was missed being included in the landmark special area that every other church going has for them. So it was just an oversight as far as I can see. The boat clubs, again, minor oversight. The Micmac Aquatic Club's beach is not included in the boat club special area, but we actually included the public park at Lions Beach as a boat club special area. So I think we just need to shuffle those two to actually have the boat club, the area that's being using as a boat club, properly designated as boat club, and the area that's public park with a public dock not be designated as boat club because it's not one. And then the last one is the Tim Hortons site on Portland Street is a very deep lot, and it's a bit of an odd configuration. And so the back parking lot there is actually owned by somebody else. These two property owners really should get together to make a viable project there in the future. And so this is putting a line on the map that I think lines up with the property lines and makes the site more attractive for potential redevelopment, which would get rid of the biggest traffic pinch point going on Portland Street, and be more conducive towards our goals in terms of not wanting drive-throughs, wanting that street front density down there in the downtown. So those are the amendments that I have. They ended up being way more district specific than I meant to be, because I know we wanted this to be higher level policy at Regional Center Community Council. My defense is that Harbor East, I had like 5 days to prepare my amendments because it was really, really early. And so these are ones that 1 or 2 of them were ones I just missed. And then some of the others that are ones that have been pointed out after the fact. So thank you for your indulgence, committee, and me not living what I preach when saying we're going to be high level here rather than district specific.
Well, speaking for the council, we accept your weak defense of your actions. Is there any further discussion on the motion before us? Seeing none, question's been called. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. I turn the chair back over. Oh, one more, Councillor Austin.
Yeah, not a motion, more of just putting on notice. I did have one big picture item that I'm not moving forward tonight, but I just wanted to flag, and that is regarding our backyard chickens. Being a country boy, I know that you can get eggs from more than just chickens. We had ducks growing up. There's breeds of ducks that are prolific layers, and I'm not entirely sold on the idea that we must micromanage this to just chickens when ducks and quail, for example, produce eggs. I'm not sure that we want to get into guinea fowl because then that enters us into the world of roosters in terms of noise complaints. So, but I do understand from staff that our chicken report is due to council imminently, and that if you recall, colleagues, we had the discussion at council and asked for that as a supplemental to say, well, we should maybe broaden this beyond just chickens to other poultry. And I think it would make more sense to have that discussion at council first before we direct anything here. So I'm going to park the ducks, quail for now, and return to that at regional council when it comes before us before the central plan is done. Thank you.
What's the biggest bird that can lay eggs?
Emu.
Turkeys, maybe. Emus. Thank you, Councillor Austin. I'll return the chair to you. I have one last one, if I may.
Oh, okay. So thank you, Councillor Mason, for chairing for me, allowing me to participate here. We'll go back to you, Councillor Mason, for another one.
Well, I have a question for staff because I'm not sure if I'm going to do it here. I could bring forward a motion. It's been one of the biggest bones of contention, but I have been talking to staff about it. I just realized I haven't gotten a clear idea about where it's landed. So the question around the current draft deletes section 108, 129, 157, 177, and 197 from the downtown Halifax, downtown Dartmouth, downtown Halifax Center corridor and HR zones. And that was the provision that formerly allowed underground parking to happen subgrade in the front and side yards. And so, there's been a lot of concern from developers, not the least of which is that we have people who are in site plan approval with stuff that has subgrade parking outside of downtown where we're talking about doing the Swiss cheese approach, who would then have to do a substantial redesign. But also, I just, I have some issues with some of the changes that have happened in package B. There's the subgrade piece. I'm wondering if staff could comment on that and whether that has been resolved and if we want to continue with that, because I'm not sure, I know in the downtowns and in the center, why would we not build right to the lot line in a downtown context, right? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. And then the other question that was raised was my understanding is in the HR zone, I think it is, and it might be in the corridor zone, there's now a requirement for a 6-meter at-grade separation between buildings in the street wall. Is that correct? Because I'm not sure that that's what we intended either. I thought we wanted to have contiguous street walls even in the HR zone. So those are my two questions about the building. And I will admit I'm not fully prepared today because I, second shot and all that, but maybe Ben could enlighten me a little bit on those.
Thanks, Councillor Mason, and through Mr. Chair, back to you in the committee. I think I'll tackle that question in two parts. I think I'll touch on the underground parking provision and talk about a little bit more about the transition. So first of all, on the underground parking provision, I think this is a matter of, staff size opening up to the cumulative impacts of what it means to allow essentially zero setbacks underground in most cases. The truth is that outside downtown area is very rare for a building not to have their outside wall aligned with the underground. It just makes usually the underground portion of the building and top portion of the building unlines, and in the Halifax context, when we're talking about maximizing the use of the site, that is getting more and more common. So the concern being concern with the proliferation of that approach and what that means to the landscaping in the front yard. There's no place for roots or trees, and just what that means in terms of squeezing impacts in terms of all the infrastructure and things we have in our right of way. Is that smart to have underground parking next to whatever we have in the right of way? Having said that, we are hearing concerns about that. So a little bit more of a broader a comment is that staff also learned fairly late in our review process that the site plan approval tool couldn't transition like we thought, like a development agreement, like we thought earlier on in the process. So some of the impacts between package A and package B are, in terms of changes, are certainly intentional, like the Robie Street Transportation Reserve. That is a change, and we're not hiding that is intentional to preserve the BRT right away, where others weren't looked at through that lens. And it is something we are working through, kind of more of a side-by-side review to understand where the troublesome points are. And for most cases, package B is being more flexible or addressing some of the concerns for churchmen developers and the design community. But having said that, there are ones like the underground parking and some of the what we are generally supposed to be minor adjustments to some of the requirements, causing some problems to some existing applications. And we, I think, as laid out in the staff report, intending to report to council on that to the supplementary report committee of the whole, and to lay out some options for smoothing out transition. I think it needs to be looked at differently for downtown Halifax versus the other ones, because the downtown Halifax plan will live on, and the Swiss cheese approach could work there, whereas I think a different approach will work for package A. The other question you had about is the street, well, I guess the 6 meter separation. I didn't think we changed that. I think package A and package B were aligned in about that. So I'd have to look back myself on comparison to see if there wasn't change, but I don't think that was intended to change.
So the specific issue is the Thompson building, because it's split across two zones, the expansion they're proposing up Harvey Street, and that there may be a 6 meter transition required, but which the way it was framed to me is that what we want? Like, we're going to have contiguous, and then the zone changes, but it's still quite dense, corridor or HR. But between the two zones, the way it's written right now may require a 6 meter separation. You know, like, it makes sense to have a 6 meter separation between any dense zone and an ER, but I'm not convinced it does between the HR and the corridor. So, I'll leave that with you. I won't make a motion on that. And since you're already bringing a supplementary report on the underground parking piece, I guess I have a little bit of more confidence, because if I understand it correctly, because the downtown plans and the center zones allow construction right to the lot line anyway, you'd have the subgrade would be underneath those walls anyway. It doesn't really functionally change anything. It's really more about the HR and corridor zones, if I'm understanding it properly.
Yes, well, through Mr. Chair, back to you. I think it depends on the setbacks. You're correct. In downtown zones, the setbacks are essentially zero anyways, or close to it. So it's a really minor impact. If you can go to 0.5 meters to the lot line anyways, then that 0.5 meters is not a big impact, or it isn't. But it is. But on some centers and corridors, like, the setback is maybe 2 meters or 3 meters in some cases. So that could have impact on existing proposals. Probably not a big impact in the long term, which was the intent of looking forward. But kind of recognizing that because the site plan approvals aren't transitioning the way we thought we would when we were proposing these changes, that we're putting our heads down and trying to make sure we get I understand the issues and can propose some options to council about how to smooth out transition, so we're not forcing new rules on developers who are halfway through a process, proceeding halfway through a process in good faith.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. Councillor Cleary, were you looking to speak?
Actually, that was way back on egg laying fowl. And actually, Councillor Mason already took my emu. I think it was an emu line. So I'm all good.
Well, we'll leave the emus for now then. Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Sorry about that. Anything else on center plan from members of council? I'm not seeing any, so we've amended the motion a fair bit here. We would be on the main motion now, so question, I would say, could be called. And all those in favor? All right. All those opposed? All right, so that carries. So that is to bed our main business. So let me just find my agenda here. We do have an in camera, but I think it would make more sense. Geez, I can't find my agenda. I know we do have motions and business arising. I'm wondering if we can do that and then go to public participation before we go in camera. Just to knock those off. Okay, not seeing any objections. I really should find that just in case I'm missing something. All right, here we go. I'm back in business. So no motions from anyone on committee. We'll do in camera in just a second. We have no added items. Does anyone have any notices of motion? None. Public participation. I believe, Ms. Clerk, that this would be the portion of the meeting in which members of the public could address us, but I don't believe we have anyone signed up today.
We do not have anyone signed up.
Okay, so that's a rather quick public participation then. If there's anyone interested, you can get in touch with the clerk in advance of our next meeting, and you're welcome to speak to us. So with that, I would now take a motion to go in camera.
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Moved by Councillor Cleary,
Second.
second by Councillor Mason. So we will reconvene in camera. Ms. Clerk, would that be on Microsoft Teams appointment in our calendar?
That would be the one, yes.
Okay, we'll see you
Just
all
ask that you
there.
leave this one.
Will do. Thank you, Ms. Clerk. We'll see you all there momentarily, members of council. Okay. Do we have everybody back? It looks like we do. So we'll pick up where we left off, coming out of in camera. We do have a motion to ratify. If someone could move that.
I'd be happy to do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Clary.
Seconded.
You got to read it first.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think because we don't actually have a motion on here. I think it's something like we approve the thing that we did in the other place.
I think it's here.
Here we go. I move that Regional Center Community Council, 1, adopt the recommendations as outlined in the private and confidential staff report dated June 23rd, 2021, and 2, direct that the private and confidential staff report dated June 23rd, 2021 be maintained private and confidential.
That would be the one. Second by Councillor Mason. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? That carries. So we
If I
already
could just interject, Mr. Chair, just approve the minutes as well, in the in-camera minutes in public.
Right, yeah. Yes, thank you. Sorry about that, Ms. Clerk. We did that. Yeah. So could we approve the in-camera minutes?
So moved, Councillor Cleary.
Second.
Okay, moved and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that is done. The minutes are done. So unless I'm forgetting anything further, the date of our next meeting would be July 26th. July 26th, 2021, if required. So stay tuned, since the if required is always key on this committee. I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Clearly. We are adjourned. Enjoy your evening, everyone.
Thank you, Chair. See you later.